G'day, I'm Pat Dennis, and you're listening to Creative Elk, where I'm going to be talking about Jordan Peele, because I've finally seen Get Out. It's the last of the big Jordan Peele movies that have come out as of recording this that I hadn't seen. I've seen Us, and Nope, and Candyman, which he wrote but didn't direct. And this isn't really a review, it's just me giving some off-the-cuff thoughts of his films and him as a director in general. I have to say, Nope, out of all of them, is the least horrifying. I mean, they're all marketed as horror movies, and I'm a humongous horror fan, but Nope felt pretty close to being an action sci-fi. It was really on the cusp of it. You know, if it had been a little bit more action-packed and a little less scary, there'd be no debate about the genre, but it definitely wasn't a straight-up horror for sure. It was also maybe a little bit more funny than the others, but it was definitely enjoyable. The monster in it, the alien spaceship, which was, spoiler alert, I'm going to be doing spoilers, so expect them. It was not a spaceship, it was actually a creature. It was a bit Lovecraftian. It was a bit of a cosmic horror thing, and I loved seeing it unfolding into different shapes. Kind of like a giant, grotesque sea creature. That was all pretty exciting rather than just being your standard abduction film. But Nope was excellent, but as far as horror movies go, it wasn't really one of them. It wasn't super scary. So it's more of a sci-fi action, and I'm sure I'm going to get completely slammed for that opinion, but if that's the case, then good on you for having your own opinion. Then on to Candyman, which he didn't direct. He wrote it, or I should say he sort of wrote it, because it's a reboot, it's a remake, so presumably it's been written before. I've actually not gotten around to the original Candyman, but as with all remakes, it's obviously not going to deter too far from that, otherwise it might as well not be a remake, it might as well be its own thing. In fact, it felt almost like a soft reboot, so I imagine it's like like the Halloween movie was, where it's the sequel to Halloween, but also kind of just rehashing it. The thing that Star Wars has done and every other franchise seems to be trying to do. Either way, it was super weird, which I appreciated. One of the strangest looking films I've seen in the cinema. I mean, A24 obviously tops pretty much every other film out there when it comes to weirdness, but that aside, Candyman not being an A24 film was still pretty darn weird. I like the fairy tale aspects of it, the urban legend aspect of it, the Bloody Mary-esque lore behind it. If you say Candyman 3 times, he'll appear and all that such. If you're going to define it as any subgenre, I suppose you would put it under body horror. He's got some grotesque body falling apart nonsense going on, which is always very fun, always very The Fly, except it's bees instead of flies. But yeah, not really my style of horror movie I usually go for, and I'm a bit disappointed I didn't see the original before seeing the reboot, sequel, remake, because I probably had plenty of things that I could have appreciated that I didn't appreciate because I'm just not knowledgeable in it. But as far as a standalone movie goes, weird enough that it's worth seeing would be my review. But as I said, he didn't direct it, he wrote it and produced it. I'm not going to talk about the movies that he just produced because it's far lesser of a role to be a producer than it is to be a writer or a director. Sorry to any producers out there. Then, moving on from Candyman down to Us. Us was fantastic. It's so weird and so creepy. He's got the clone family thing going on where they're like a weird, lesser shadow version of them, and you've got the strange flashbacks and the going down into like the underground area to try to figure out what's going on, and it's all very unsettling, and there's mystery going on and horror going on, and it's all very, very creepy and uncanny valley. I think like a lot of horror movies, it does fall apart in the final quarter. You know, it's easy to make mystery and easy to build suspense, but it's a lot more difficult to do payoff. And I think the last quarter of the film is really quite silly, especially the end of it, where they're all joining hands across the world, and it's just dumb. But I mean, it's hard to stick a landing when the entire premise of the movie is supposed to be vague and strange and unsettling, and at the end you do have to present something to the viewer because otherwise they feel cheated. So I get why it turned out kind of bad towards the end, but everything before that final quarter was just excellent. And difficulties in sticking endings isn't just a problem in Us, it's a problem in the genre in general. If the entire premise of a movie is to really set up a strange, unsettling, suspenseful premise, it's hard to then stick a landing that's not going to disappoint people, because everyone's going to have something more in their mind, and you can never please everyone. So it's forgivable. Because of the short naming way that most Jordan Peele films seem to be named in the style of, I keep wanting to say Them as one of his films, because you've got Nope and Us and Get Out, and Them sounds like it would fit right in, but that's Giant Ants. It's an old black and white movie, arguably inspired Aliens 2. Not Jordan Peele, but worth seeing regardless. That's my little bit of a classic horror film tangent there. Watch Jordan Peele films and also go watch Them! ! Big old giant ants in the desert. Fantastic. But moving on from the tangent, let's get back to Get Out. We've gone full circle. That's where we started this here recording. Get Out, which I watched last night, is incredibly fantastic, and because I watched it last night rather than, at 2 in the morning on Netflix a year ago like I did for Us, or in the cinema in 2021 like I did for Candyman, it's definitely far fresher in my memory than the other films, but it holds a lot of similarities to them as far as the quality goes. Like the other films, there's strong social commentary running all the way through it as a theme, which adds to the film in that it's a bit more depth than just it being your regular slasher film or what have you. There's actually trying to say something in the film, which is a bit more cerebral and interesting. The characters are also far more fleshed out. Every character in the film feels like a person with a history and a backstory, and you could throw them in any situation and they would exist because they're real people. So that's always impressive. And I think one of the things that sticks most of it is just how well he does unsettling and how well he does tension. All through the entirety of Get Out, you just feel tension building, and there's like a bowl forming in the pit of your stomach because you can just feel that something is wrong, it's getting worse, and soon it's going to come to a head. So definitely Get Out is fantastic. It's one of the best horror films out there, I would say. It also helps a great deal that the premise involves mind control and body snatching, which, one of my personal biggest fears is losing control of your mind, whether it be Alzheimer's or brain damage or just the slow deterioration of pink, fleshy brain matter that you keep inside your noggin. Either way, your brain and your mind is your entire self. So the idea of losing your ability to think is terrifying to me. So that being the premise of a horror movie instantly makes it scarier to me. So it really resonated with me in the fact that, the fear in the film is a personal fear of mine. So that definitely heightened the frightening factor of the movie. If you don't fear that, well, what's wrong with you? You're insane. But if it's not one of your fears, you'll find it less scary, just in the same way that if you're not scared of spiders, you're going to find eight-legged freaks less scary, and if you're not scared of aliens, you're going to find Nope less scary. But if it is a fear that resonates with you, of course the film's going to be far more frightening. So I lucked out on that one, is what I'm saying. But that's about all I had to say about Jordan Peele. This is never meant to be an in-depth review or even a review at all, really. It's just me rambling about my, vague opinions on Jordan Peele as a director. I think he's fantastic and maybe one of the best horror directors going around at the moment. I'm disappointed it took me so long to sit down and watch his movies, but there's just so many movies out there, and sometimes you're restricted by how much money you have in your pocket when a film comes out in the cinema and what's on what streaming services. But I am glad that I've finally actually sat down and watched his big three. It's kind of annoying that the only one I've seen in cinema is Candyman, which he didn't in fact direct, and you can tell that the quality of Candyman's directing isn't quite up to snuff when compared against Jordan Peele's own directed films. But I guess if you're going to take anything away from this audio recording, it's that if you've been sitting on Jordan Peele for some reason, like I have, stop doing that and get to it and watch all of his stuff because it's excellent. I haven't watched Twilight Zone. I don't think he actually directed any of that. I don't even know if he wrote any of that. I think he's just the presenter. But that's more of my allegiance to Rod Serling. I don't see any point in making an anthology series and calling it The Twilight Zone if Rod Serling isn't involved. He's the heart and soul of The Twilight Zone, and anything that is without him, it's not The Twilight Zone. Just call it its own thing. Call it Jordan Peele Presents, like Guillermo del Toro just did with Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. That could have just as easily been called The Twilight Zone, but it didn't need to be because it's not Rod Serling. It's Guillermo del Toro. So I haven't watched that from a weird hill that I've decided to arbitrarily die on. But I guess also, if you're taking anything away from this, go watch the original Twilight Zone, not the later 2 or so reboots, but the actual black and white one that Rod Serling himself put his heart and soul into. It's some of the best, if not the best, television ever made. So I guess that's actually 3 things you're supposed to take away from all of this. Watch Them with the big old ants. Watch all of Jordan Peele's stuff because it's fantastic, and watch the original black and white Twilight Zone from Rod Serling. And I guess while you're at it, also watch Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities because it's also pretty good. Some of the episodes are a little slow, but some of them, like the Lovecraft-inspired ones, are also excellent. So that's 4 things. Watch Them, Jordan Peele's stuff, Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, and also the original Twilight Zone. And I guess on top of all of that, also tune in next week for another one of these long, rambling videos by me, Pat Dennis, here on Creative Elk.